Emily is my name. I have a 5-year-old son and I am 26. 29-year-old ex-husband of mine cheated on me with 28-year-old co-worker Bethany. When I learned that Bethany was expecting his child, I was 2 months along with our second child. My ex moved out of the house to live with her after I miscarried. That was 2 years ago. It came into being. Up until a few months ago, my mother-in-law supported me and stayed away from my ex, his lover, and their child. My in-laws and I were really close and I adore them. My parents and mother-in-law are the closest of friends. She is utterly devoted to her grandson and me. My ex-husband's affair partner is furious about this. My in-laws immediately severed their ties with them. The fact that her child will never experience the affection of grandparents made Bethany envious. Her son has a father, at least. This leads us to the issue. My mother-in-law has amended her will due to her unfortunate long-term illness. Since he was the only child, my ex-husband would inherit everything. However, my son is now going to inherit her money, property, and house. Until my son is 18, I will inherit most of her money and possessions. I'll have faith in it. My parents will handle it if I die before then. They are unaware of this. The problem is that my ex-husband asked for forgiveness as soon as they learned she was unwell. The mistress began to treat her with kindness. She had called her derogatory names, instigated conflicts, and had her spend time with his infant. Despite being bedridden, my mother-in-law has stated that she wants to go with a bank, thus she will put up with this. She is free to choose to do this or not. I haven't pushed her in any direction. Her son believes he is still included in the will, and they want her money. In addition, he believes that his grandmother will now recognize his child and give him money. My mother-in-law hasn't come out and declared that she has forgiven them yet. She hates her son for destroying our family, as well as his mistress. She wants to exact revenge all at once and reward those who deserve it. The mistress never stops implying that her child would grow up to be a famous college student, etc. Whenever she is around, money is involved. My cousin by marriage, who happens to be my mother-in-law's niece, has overheard her talking on the phone about what wallpaper my mother-in-law wants in the dining room when she moves in and how she doesn't have any taste at all. She also remarked that if my ex-husband owns the house, she will be able to finally remove images of my kid. Unfortunately for her, my kid will inherit it. I won't make any adjustments till my son is 18. It's his grandmother's house, and he ought to be free to treasure it just as she furnished it. Although this revenge will be satisfying, I really can't tell anyone and I'll have to lose my mother-in-law in the process. It really is a lose-lose situation, and I fear the day she passes away. I love her, and she means a lot to me. It is reported that she cannot sleep until she is certain that her son and her mistress have received justice, and she wants this for her grandchild. She desires this because her father and his affair partner also destroyed her childhood. She wishes for my kid to know that he was and always will be cherished. I hope my son will cherish the wonderful women in his life forever. I hope he spent more time with his granny. Since the original poster doesn't seek for guidance, I would only advise the mother-in-law to acquire legal counsel from a second source. It might be wise to offer OPZX a modest payment to keep him from contesting. If she doesn't allow him and his family to visit from now on, he could use that as proof that she changed her mind about the will. Edit, I'm sorry, but there's nothing I can do to appease the people who feel that I should have asked my mother-in-law to include my ex's new child. Yes, I'm selfish for being joyful, but I'm going to prioritize my son and myself. That child was one of the reasons I miscarried and why my son hasn't had a father figure in more than 2 years. I am unable to alter my mother-in-law's opinion of him. Although I feel sorry for the infant, I can't take care of it on my own. I'm not accountable for it. I'd made an effort to speak with my mother-in-law, but her father prioritized his affair children above her, ruining her entire upbringing. She doesn't want anything to do with it or her son because of this. Despite being aware of the hardships she endured as a result of infidelity, he chose to treat her in the same way. His grandfather has shown him that he prefers his aunt and uncle to his mother. You wouldn't be thrilled about giving the infant access to yet another item if this were your situation. Once again, I want to thank everyone who has listened to me. I have forwarded my mother-in-law the kind words. Together, we've laughed a lot. Edit 2, after I miscarried. The mistress would email pictures of her ultrasound to my family or to me. She wrote me a letter in the first mail, full of the ugliest words about myself, my son, and the baby I miscarried. She had even tagged me on a social media account that I was unaware of. It was her baby shower invitation. She has treated me horribly and cruelly in relation to my miscarried child. If anything similar occurred to the individuals who are criticizing me in the comments, they wouldn't be nearly as kind as I am. It really is best to ignore her child. Her son is not the person I want raising my son. I truly don't want to seem conceited. While I understand that they don't owe me a trust fund, I have 2 children, and I would never treat them any differently going forward unless there was a dependency that would only be exacerbated by giving money. How you could desire to see 2 of every 3 children financially secure defies me. My folks have a great life. Though it wasn't evident until this point, I've always felt they did more for my siblings than for me. My brother made a joke about being wealthy when I reached 25. I had no idea what he meant now. "Never mind," he murmured, his face full of embarrassment. Perhaps my parents gave him money only once, when he was 25. When we finally called my sister, she confirmed that she had received the same amount from a trust fund. Then, my sister disclosed that our parents had informed her she would also receive a trust fund at 30, and my brother revealed that he had received another one at same age. We're discussing large sums of money as though their children will lead very different lives from mine. I don't know if this puts me in a superior position, but I think it's completely screwed up. I questioned my parents in the most non-confrontational way I could, and my dad said they don't plan to grant me a trust because I chose not to be a member of the family. My mom isn't allowed to spend time alone with our kids because I let my wife punish her for having bipolar disorder. I find this unfair because I believe my mom manages her illness rather well. I have her back even though my wife doesn't agree, even though she was a nice mother and gets along well with my nieces and nephews. My mother claimed to love my brothers and me equally, but she won't accept my kids as her own and despises my wife, therefore she isn't providing for us financially. Then, my dad responded, "I should go," and she stormed off. That evening, my father contacted me, telling me not to ask anyone about money and how dare I put them in that situation. In this case, I believe the OP is at fault. The fact that OP's mother-in-law is too obstinate to acknowledge that OP was raised properly enough for her to marry OP is not the fault of OP's children. Thus, while it's unfortunate that they're losing out on money, it's much more detrimental that they're losing out on the possibility of developing a lovely bond with their grandmother. Because OP's wife supports his mother's unfair treatment, OP's parents also treat him unfairly. I think that sounds fair. See what the community thinks. Isabel Sadie responds, "I would say you're the a-hole. Your wife decided that she didn't trust your mom and wouldn't let her watch her kids, while you disagreed and did nothing. So, basically, the relationship with your parents is not good, and your wife and parents hate each other. Why would they give you any money?" Carmen Cage responds, "You're the a-hole. I would be furious if my daughter-in-law treated me differently for a mental disorder. What your wife is doing is disgusting. I understand why they are doing this. I feel like the real issue is your wife thinks it's okay to treat your mom like crap because she is bipolar. Because you aren't standing up for your mom, that shows you think it's okay. And it's not. You should have a serious talk with your wife about how treating people with mental disorders differently is wrong and directly hurting your family financially." The deadly housefrau responds, "You're the a-hole. With the context that you're letting your wife treat your mother terribly, how can you expect them to take that well? You even admit your mother handles her disorder well." Music, I had a child when I was a young man. I offered the mother the money for it after we both agreed on a. When we parted ways, I figured she had the. She came to me a year later to tell me she'd given birth. Nothing had changed, I informed her. I still didn't want a relationship, but I would be happy to give her stability in terms of money. Being from a wealthy household, my parents set up one of my trusts when I was born. I went to court to give up my rights and consent to child support, and I signed everything over to Carmen, the child. I paid twice the amount I was allotted, increasing over time to reflect my improving financial situation. I earned my PhD, started a lucrative career, got married, and had two beautiful daughters in the years following Carmen's birth. Throughout it all, I made sure the trust once signed over was growing well and quickly paid my child support. For a number of years, Carmen's mother persuaded me to get in touch with Carmen, but I consistently turned her down. She tried to talk sense into my head by harassing my wife and daughters on multiple occasions. My mental state remained constant. Carmen and I have never met. Carmen began reaching out to me in 2016. I firmly declined her letter, which she had written, in a courteous and gracious response. I was honest, but I wasn't mean. She went away, but would reappear every several months. I politely refused her advances. Despite always having my approval to do so, my parents and daughters have similarly declined to be in a relationship with her. As her efforts became more intense, I threatened to take money from her. She could only receive as much money as she needed to pay for college, and the rest would be released to her when she turned 30, which will be very soon, according to the terms of the trust one set up for her. She began to annoy us via emails, letters, and phone calls. Despite my daughter's rejection of her advances, she discovered their numerous social media accounts and tormented them. If she didn't stop, I threatened to rob her trust. She identified herself as my daughter when she just showed up at my father's family reunion. After 3 years of her behavior, I lost my cool and lost my composure. She was the worst mistake I've ever made. I raged at her, and I declared that the trust was effectively lost. Tearful, she left. I contacted my financial advisor and revoked the trust, which remains under my ownership. I regret how I spoke to her now, but I didn't take away her trust fund. It was too harsh, in my family's opinion, and I should return it. I apologized to Carmen in writing for what I had done. In response, her mother replied that I was a terrible person and a deadbeat parent, and they both felt entitled to a portion of my accumulated fortune. I told her that was it from me in regards to Carmen. I will never give her another dime. I'm torn. Do I look like an a-hole? Edited to add, Carmen was born when I was 20 years old. After Carmen was born, the mother decided to got my money, and didn't talk to me or get in touch with me for a year. It was like a newborn had just erupted on me. At least 9 months were given to the mother to adjust to the notion. What if she was seeking her biological family and had been adopted out after birth? Her mother told me one thing about her decision to have her, and I'm expected to just accept it? I was against having kids. Furthermore, why is it so bad to not want a relationship with a stranger? I've never told lies about what I wanted. I was very clear from the start that I would not be engaged. How can I be held responsible for Carmen's mother's elevated expectations? With the exception of our conception and my legal duty to support her, I had no involvement with this girl. I went above and beyond what the majority of absentee parents do. I did at least want to take care of her. Added after editing, I recently made a realization. Carmen's mother lived across the nation from my family and me, but I never brought that up. She and her mother reside in Washington State, her family and I reside in Connecticut. In 2016, Carmen relocated to Connecticut. I had only spoken to her once, when she was around 2 months old, prior to that cross-country move. In other words, I never saw or spoke to the child between about March 1990 and July 2016. On occasion, though, the mother would call my house and make demands. She would even call and yell at my wife. I may therefore have a predisposition towards Carmen because of her mother's behavior. However, it must be acknowledged that I gave up my rights. After Carmen was born, I never had any rights over her, not that I ever wanted any. And given that her mother had driven her across the nation from my location, it would have been quite challenging to establish a healthy relationship. Of course, you could try to make it work as a parent, which I am not. People do that all the time. But I didn't want to at this moment. Yeah, I've made the decision to return the trust, but I'm giving someone else command of it. Carmen and I have also chatted, and we have scheduled one meeting. Just one gathering. That's all the questions I will answer for her. I'm only willing to offer that. To be honest, neither my family nor I feel comfortable with her around. She has been tormenting my daughters, who are 13 and 14. Carmen has been contacting two preteen females on their social media accounts and pestering real youngsters. My girls were 10 and 9 years old when she began to harass them. Mom has, in my perspective, been accumulating money by playing the long game. Given that OP claimed his family was wealthy, I wouldn't be shocked if she chose to keep the child in order to receive money from him. In that instance, she made her bed, and Carmen is the one who is most hurt. Carmen has sent a clear message that Opie and his family are not interested in forming bonds, and while I feel bad for her because she is innocent in this position, she ought to act with more respect and leave them alone. It appears that her mother did not instill moral and ethical ideals in her, even though OP was able to control herself. It all makes perfect sense. I want to know if the community feels the same way. Chuck the Duck 214 responds, not the a-hole. I can understand her wanting a relationship with her bio dad, but she went about it in the complete wrong way. The harassment and stalking are going way too far. You were pretty harsh calling her the worst mistake you ever made, but like you said, she had been stressing you out for years, and you apologized, so I don't think you're the a-hole here. Dawn Baby Thought states, everyone sucks here. Carmen and her mother for harassing you, but also you for throwing money around like it solves all problems and then taking it back when you find out that it doesn't. Maybe if you spent more time actually speaking to them, going all the way back to that, not a things would be different now. According to Amara Amos's, not Viejo, you were under the impression she would have an A, and suddenly you had a child. Instead of flaking, you financially support the child well into adulthood. You shouldn't be forced to have a relationship with her just because she won't take no for an answer. You also don't need to keep giving her money. My guess is she wanted in on your will and figured she has to get a relationship with you to get a piece. I have a daughter and 2 sons. I think I've given them a wonderful life. I spent time with them on holidays, supported them academically, and even gave them money for things like automobiles and school. Their independence was always the aim. Having said that, I've had better luck with the economy than they have. My oldest brother and his wife welcomed a kid in March of last year. In order to ensure that my grandchild will have money for college, I made the decision to establish a trust fund for him. I set up a trust for my daughter's child as an early baby shower gift because she only revealed her own pregnancy in July. My younger son made the decision that he and his spouse would not have children. That's all right. In my opinion, that was a wise decision on his part. Although he and his wife are not the most responsible of people, I would still love to have more grandchildren. Upon informing my daughter about the trust, my son's spouse began to behave strangely. Later on, I learned that she and my son are angry with me for not placing their trust in them. However, the trust is intended for my grandchildren, not for my children. They're cats, is that who I'm meant to give it to? In my opinion, they are acting as though they are entitled to my money. I told them no way, that they were grown-ups and could support themselves, that my older 2 children were carrying a financial load, and that it was my intention to take that off my grandchildren. They said I was trying to make them have children against their will and punishing them for being responsible. After my son complained to his aunt, my sister-in-law, she is now attempting to get him, my husband, not my son, to establish a fund, perhaps for housing, for my youngest child. My spouse believes I'm being unreasonable even though I told him flatly no. Do I look like an a-hole? The funds were intended for Opie's grandkids rather than Opie's children. The money is off limits to Opie's children. The son and wife of the OP are being conceited. OP ought to remind them that they will not be shelling out a lot of cash for their children's fees. A deleted user writes, everyone sucks here. Your son sounds like he could have handled it better, but why not have a house fund or something such for him? In the end, you're making your other kids' lives easier by giving their kids money, so why shouldn't your other child benefit from some help too? Child-free people always get the shaft. According to Andromock97, not the a-hole. You didn't give your children money, you gave it in a trust to your grandchildren. If the money was for your kids, you would be the a-hole. But it's for your grandchildren, which is totally fair and not at all discriminatory towards your kids. Just to be clear, the trusts are in your grandchildren's names and for them, not for your children. And your child-free kid really has nothing to complain about. According to SP Nepo, not the a-hole. The money isn't for your kids, it's for your grandkids. They are, in fact, being entitled. And just so they understand that you are not trying to pressure them into having kids, you could make it clear that they're not getting any more of your money, period. I think it is probably a good decision for them not to have kids because they seem very self-centric. I mean, when you buy birthday presents for your grandkids after all, surely they don't expect something too foreign.